few developers have the reputation or legacy that compares to Rareware. For the longest time, they were the gaming industry's darling and Nintendo's right-hand man in the 90s before they were bought by Microsoft. They were responsible for putting DK back in the limelight with the Donkey Kong Country trilogy, rose to the top tier of the fighting game scene with Killer Instinct, revolutionized first-person shooters on consoles with GoldenEye 007, made a surprising competitor to Mario Kart with Diddy Kong Racing, and fully laid the groundwork for the collectathon subgenre with Banjo-Kazooie. They were practically on top of the world, carrying Nintendo on their backs during the 5th generation, and while the PlayStation still dominated that generation of consoles, Rareware's rogues gallery of exclusives put up a good fight in favor of the Nintendo 64. But when the 6th generation hit, Rareware went on a bit of a downward spiral and eventually became washed up by the early 2010s. Now, even though a lot of people like to blame this on the Microsoft buyout, really it was the result of a bunch of their big talent leaving the company. Their output became underwhelming to say the least. They still had some good games like Grabbed by the Ghoulies and the remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day, but there were a few forgettable titles like Cameo, Elements of Power, straight up bad ones like Perfect Dark Zero, or completely misreading the room with the admittedly fun Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. And Kinect Sports exists, I think. I don't know, this glue just smells really good.
Slot tackle! Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Oh!
People just didn't like their current output of games, and there have been attempts to go back to the company's roots with stuff like the Rare Replay Collection and Killer Instinct 2013. Sea of Thieves was fun, but it didn't launch in a very good state, and at the time it only proved again that Rare had lost their way. However, at E3 2018, there was a surprising announcement that they were going to be reviving one of their most cherished IPs, one that was generation-defining and began with the letter B.
Fuck you, it's Battletoads!
Yeah, they decided to revive the Battletoads. You all know the Battletoads. Rash, the blue one, and Mario. This was a surprising announcement to say the least, because I don't think Battletoads was at the top of everyone's minds when it came to legendary franchises from Rare. They were basically Rare's response to the success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they tried their own thing with it instead of it being a blatant knockoff. It went on for 4 mainline games minus handhelds, with the first one on the NES being infamous for its deranged difficulty, and it had a legacy for being a popular prank phone called a GameStop.
Hey! You got bad phones!
This series was 90s as fuck, and it wasn't the first thing that came to fans' minds on the topic of potential Rareware revivals, but it happened because that's what Rareware wanted. Xbox tends to give their studios complete creative control on what they want to make, and in the case of Rare, they're the ones that get to choose what happened to their franchises, and they wanted to reboot Battletoads for some reason. Ignore the fans practically begging for something Banjo-related. This E3 announcement had nothing to show at the time besides, hey, this exists, and when the game was properly unveiled at the very next E3 in 2019, the internet fucking hated it. It has over 20,000 dislikes at the time of recording this video, and while it did have a lot of jank, choppy animations and placeholder assets used with not a lot of context as to what's going on, most of the actual comments I could find on the matter consist of people writing it off as bad because they didn't like the art style. The game eventually released in August of 2020, fans lampooned it even more during launch, and everybody instantly forgot about it. Not very many people seem to bring it up nowadays, and even then the perception is very mixed. This game just never had good discourse surrounding it because everybody seems to fall on one of two sides. Either you're a corporate shill who thinks the game is perfect and refuses to point out a single flaw, or you're a stubborn contrarian who hates everything about it because modern equals bad. Oh yeah, people also use this game as ammunition in a gay console war on Twitter or something, I don't know. And that's a big reason I want to talk about this game today. I want to give the game an unbiased look, compare it to the previous games when necessary, point out any flaws it might have, but also give it a fair chance and not just trash it for being different. I paid full price for this game on launch day and didn't play it through Game Pass like so many others did. I honestly feel like that's a big factor in some people's opinions on it because they just didn't pay money for it. And since this game didn't really get a physical release, normally I can't really hold up a physical copy, so I'm gonna have to improvise. How good was this game really, and why was the response so polarizing? Is it a disgusting stain on the history of Rare, or is it some misunderstood masterpiece? This game wasn't developed by Rare themselves, but they did oversee production and had the final say in a lot of things. The actual team behind Battletoads 2020 was Delilah Studios, which are famous for Battletoads 2020. Yeah, this studio doesn't exactly have the healthiest resume. They were founded in 2012 and only really did support work for other games like The Escapists and Sea of Thieves, with Battletoads 2020 being their first full-on game. They're also currently working on Disney's Illusion Land, which looks nothing like the other Disney Illusion games. Why Rare chose them to develop this game is beyond me. The game tosses you right into the character select upon starting a new game right after booting it up to that thrashing cover of the NES game's theme. After that and a cutscene, you're tossed right into the game and it wastes no time. So let's get the massive elephant out of the room right now and talk about the visuals. This was a major factor in the game's reveal being as disliked as it was because people really did not like this game's art style. They felt it was too cartoony and didn't lend well to the old games. Honestly, I can't say I agree. In fact, I fucking love it. This game is absolute eye candy. The environments are heavily detailed with plenty going on in the backgrounds that are really fun to gaze at. It's got this bright, poppy comic book art style, and I honestly think it fits well with Battletoads. As for the character designs, I'm a bit more mixed. The Toads themselves look really good and stand out from one another as opposed to some of the older games which just recolored the same sprite for all of them. They weren't really majorly redesigned or anything, as they do share a large amount of their characteristics from Battletoads Arcade, but with minor changes in different proportions to fit the game's art style. As for the argument that it's too cartoony, Battletoads in general was cartoony as fuck. Mutant reptiles that shapeshift to beat up monsters isn't exactly the most down-to-earth thing. The game also has this slight grain filter that isn't really noticeable in the footage you're seeing thanks to YouTube compression, but seeing this game in person on a nice gaming monitor is truly something else. What I don't like are the designs of the new characters. They just don't fit well with Battletoads and have this cheap, inoffensive simplicity to them, and they look like they were designed by businessmen, not artists. A big example is the main villains, the Topians. They look straight out of the Fairly Odd Parents, not anything resembling the old Battletoads games. And then there's the Dark Queen. Oh Jesus fucking Christ, here we go. Simply put, I don't like this redesign at all. I can understand wanting to give her a new look, but this just isn't it. I actually don't have a problem with the lack of skin being shown off, even though I do think it would have been more fitting of her character. I can live with females being covered up, that's not my issue here. Seriously, look at Battletoads 2020, they were trying way too hard here. You can cover up sexy females and still make them look good. Ada Wong's redesign in the Resident Evil 4 remake I actually prefer over her original design. She just looks better in a sweater in my opinion. The Dark Queen on the other hand has way more problems than just covering up, if that even is a problem. In the old games, she towered over the Toads and could probably rip your spine from your ass and hit you over the head with it. Here though, she's tiny and she hunches over a lot of the time. I get that it takes place 26 years after Battletoads Arcade and she's a bit older, but why is she so small? Finally, the face. This is ugly as sin, I don't care what anyone says. She's got this derpy expression a lot of the time and she looks more like a frog than the damn frogs. But other than the new characters and the Dark Queen, I really enjoyed this game's art direction. It gives me vibes of Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with a little bit of Rayman Origins thrown in there. This game also has fully animated cutscenes, but they stick out weirdly in comparison to the gameplay. The animation is good, but you can tell they're motion tweened as opposed to fully hand-drawn. The Toads never shapeshift in these cutscenes as a result of model limitations. One detail of these I really like is that Rash's sunglasses bend and flex to represent his current mood, like a replacement for eyebrows of some sort. I just think it's neat. Now the gameplay is where this gets interesting, because Battletoads is a series known for two things, being hard and having variety. For example, there's 12 levels in the original game. Throughout the game, you fight enemies, go down a hole on ropes, ride turbo bikes, platform on ice, snakes, and underwater, surf in the sun while avoiding bombs, ride rockets in hell, climb 2 towers, race rats to defuse bombs, and ride on a weird Segway thing trying to get away from the void. Got all that down? It's gonna be on the test. That's just one game, not counting the other 3. It was a poorly programmed, unfocused mess that was pretty fun to learn and get good at, but that's not enough to carry a whole series, and I think I speak for everyone when I say a more focused game with a consistent gameplay style throughout would have been better. Battletoads Arcade and Battletoads Double Dragon both did this, and I honestly consider them better than the other 2 games. Now, jumping into Battletoads 2020, the game instantly puts you into a beat-em-up setting akin to the start of the previous games, but instead of a basic jump and attack button, you have standard attacks, heavy attacks, and launchers. Just tapping the attack button does give you a standard combo akin to the previous games, but the extra abilities you have at your disposal here, as well as the more obscure tech, really make the combat shine here. Each character has different movesets and attributes to make them stand out. Zitz is fast and relies on hit-and-run strategies to stay alive during intense situations, but its attacks don't hit very hard. Pimple may be slow and his combos are small, but its attacks hit like a truck. Or I guess you could say a train. Rash is the all-rounder here with the easiest to understand moveset. I'd honestly say he's the best one in most situations, and he's definitely my favorite. By the way, can we just talk about how disgusting the characters' names are? Why are they all named after skin conditions? If there was a 4th character, what would he be called? Acne? Herpes? There is more to the combat than I initially let on, however. Remember those heavy attacks? There's several for each character. There's one you charge up, one to end a combo, and a super that can be executed after hitting the X button a certain amount of times depending on the character. Although this one takes some setup to do without getting hit or missing. There's air combos, tongue grappling, stun projectiles, and attack canceling with the dodge button, which also works on the supers in case you fuck up and do them at the wrong time so you can avoid getting hit. And check this shit out, after an air combo, you can tongue grapple the same enemy to do another air combo. You can turn around in the middle of a combo to defend yourself from anything behind you, you can switch characters at any time with the D-pad as long as they're still alive, and not only do their animations entering the screen count as attacks, but switching Toads keeps your current combo going. This rocks! Each character also has aerial heavy attacks, and while Zitz doesn't exactly shine in that department, in fact it's pretty shit, Pimples is one of his best attacks due to it hitting 3 times, and Rashes doesn't look too crazy on the surface aside from it just looking cool, but you can do this after landing a regular air combo for maximum damage. Yet another reason I think Rash is the best character. It doesn't help that his combo finisher hits multiple times and follows directly into his launcher. Compare all of this to the combat in the previous games, which was as basic as you could get. You can jump, run, dash attack. Yeah. It's definitely meant to be more mindless in the older games, which isn't a bad thing. Sometimes you just want to turn your brain off and pummel some goons. But Battletoads 2020 adds so much more depth to it. This is part of the subgenre I like to call the thinking man's beat 'em up. It's not quite Devil May Cry, but it's bound to keep you engaged if you're looking for something with a bit more nuance to it, rather than just a button masher. I do have my gripes with the combat though. Certain enemies block indefinitely unless you charge up a heavy swing, but that's the only attack you can use to break their block. Not even the devastating supers can break the blocks. You have to use the standard charge attack with the B button. Your base movement is also a little slow, but spamming dodge mitigates that a bit and it turns into a full-on run button when there's no enemies present. Some of the morphs that the Toads perform are also just plain weird. They're mostly known for turning their limbs into weapons in the old games, and that rings true for some of the attacks here, but most of them are just random objects. Rash swings a fish around, uppercuts with a rubber chicken, and instead of a giant boot, he gets a gross, overly detailed foot. His super attack is him playing an arcade cabinet with NES music from the original Battletoads. You seriously didn't use music from the arcade game? You know what, let me fix this. Pimple's attacks are mostly fitting, but his super has him turning into a mummy? What's the significance? Why is this his super? Zitz especially gets a bunch of weird shit. A jackhammer, which is good enough, I guess. A jet engine has his heavy swing, and what the fuck is that? What is that? There's more to do in these levels than just combat, though. The game tosses you a puzzle to solve every now and then, and they're really not much to write home about. Some of them test your stupid goblin brain, but I didn't get stuck once when I was recording footage for this video. There's also hooks you can grapple onto for traversal, and going into the background is so goddamn cool. It kinda reminds me of certain parts in Rayman Legends where you bounce into the background. Jesus, that's the second time I brought up Rayman today.
Review the Rayman game.
But remember, this is a Battletoads game, so extra gameplay styles are a guarantee here. But unfortunately, that's where the cracks begin to show in the foundation. Of course I expected more gameplay styles, because that's what Battletoads is known for. Probably the most famous one of these is the turbo bikes, and these don't really do it for me here. The main problem is the perspective they chose. It's behind the back instead of side-scrolling this time, and while that doesn't sound like the worst idea on paper, walls fly directly into the camera, basically blocking your view for half a second every time there's one in the middle. It fucks with my eyes every time it happens, and falling is so instant it feels like the game kills you the frame you touch the gap. There's also 2 of these in the whole game, one at the very beginning and one at the very end. Another stupid thing this game loves to do is throw 30-second minigames at you during random points. They are literally nothing but QuickTime events, and they're never in the middle of levels, they're in between cutscenes and have their own section in the level select. My least favorite one is this Toad Shambo thing. It's basically rock, paper, scissors. The thing is, it ends no matter the outcome and there's 0 consequences. These sections just exist as padding, and there's 2 of the Toad Shambo ones divided by a boss. The second one is entirely scripted with the Dark Queen losing 3 times in a row every time. Why am I doing this? Why can't I skip it? Why couldn't it just be cutscenes of this stuff happening instead of programming this dog shit that's only used for 20 seconds in the whole game? The minigames aren't horrible, they're just completely pointless. Imagine playing Rareware with each minigame also having a 2-minute cutscene playing after it. That's what this game feels like at times. But that's whatever, as long as there's a solid beat-em-up structure throughout the game with occasional set pieces like the turbo bikes, I can deal with these stupid minigames. And then we get to Chapter 3 where the game tosses the beat-em-up style in the trash. Basically, Pimple leaves the ship with 2 of the Queen's things, and now you're swapping between a bullet hell shooter and a puzzle platformer. This is the worst part of the entire game because both styles aren't that fun, it's the longest chapter out of all of them, and nothing happens in the story to justify it. Okay, obviously I didn't come here for grade A storytelling, that's what other games are for. But since the plot stops dead in its tracks so you can swap between two unfun gameplay styles, this entire chapter is 100% filler and has no reason to exist. The shooter levels are pretty simple. Left stick moves, right stick shoots, right trigger does a dodge, and there's weapon power-ups and health to pick up, and bosses to fight. Or I'm sorry, one boss to fight. I'm just not a fan of 2D shoot-em-ups, so these never really gripped me. I got through them pretty smoothly, but it felt more like a chore than a challenge to kill all the enemies. The puzzle platforming is fine, but like the space shooter levels, it's not what comes to mind when you think of Battletoads, and after the first one, you've basically experienced all there is to offer. But there's 2 more of these, so fuck you. And of all the gameplay styles to lock into a single chapter, why pick the 2 that couldn't be any more different? Let me just play the 2 back to back to show you what I mean.
Jesus, we're going in hard! Grab
him! The chapter ends with the worst level in the entire game. It's another minigame, but it's like 20 minigames randomly shuffled for you. You have to find the minigames on the control panel with their corresponding icons and complete them in order. A few are a little engaging, like this one where you have to grab icons in a minefield, but another one literally just has you pressing the A button a few times. This is not difficult in the slightest. All it takes is a little bit of focus, but this goes on for 6 minutes and feels like 2 hours. Finally, Chapter 4 starts off with this weird shit where you have to run down this tunnel avoiding hazards and escaping the forbidden liquid. I actually like this section. It's fun, stressful, and reminds me of Rat Race from the original game, except it doesn't make me want to beat the dog up. After finally getting another combat section, then the second bike level, then the final boss, that's the game. Those last 3 are back-to-back without cutscenes, and they aren't even split up by a results screen. It's like they got tired by Chapter 3 and stopped to rest for a bit, but then rushed through the finale like they were late to work. Did their budget run out? What the hell happened? Alright, I'm sorry if I keep jumping from one extreme to another by talking about several gameplay styles back to back, but that's exactly what this game does, and it's insanely jarring to play. It feels like this game's structure was decided upon via dartboard. They just toss one random thing after another with no consistency or reason. That and some of these minigames feel completely pointless during single player because the game expects you to be playing co-op. And that's the big thing here. This game was designed around multiplayer first and foremost. Hell, it's one of the main bullet points in the E3 2018 announcement. So, might as well give co-op a shot. Time to go online and see if anyone's still playing this thing. Wait, where's online? It's just press start to join in on the character select. What's the deal? Well, there's another major blow to this game. There's no online multiplayer. Why? This game's development was supervised by Rare, the developer whose currently popular game is, you know, online multiplayer focused. You're telling me they couldn't have helped bring online to Battletoads? Second, this game was funded and published by Xbox, the famed console manufacturer who's known for, I don't know, popularizing online multiplayer on consoles. This was a first-party console exclusive. What the fuck? Even Nintendo, with their god-awful online services that don't even fucking work, are able to provide online multiplayer in some of their local co-op focused games. Finally, remember when this game came out? August of 2020. 2020! This game came out smack dab in the middle of Corona, and nobody involved with this game said, we're releasing this at a pretty bad time for get-togethers and parties. Wouldn't it make sense for online multiplayer to be an option in case people get the you-know-what? The Steam version of the game does support remote play, but if you're on Xbox or playing the game through PC Game Pass, it's local only. So if you want to play multiplayer but you got Corona, you better hope your sister has it too! Now that was a big fucking letdown, especially during the game's release. But since it's been 3 years since the game came out and the world's back to normal now, I guess local co-op being the only option isn't that big of a deal, even if it is a little inconvenient. I actually have played this game in co-op before. I don't have any footage, but I can say that we played up until the first stage in Chapter 2. This game's multiplayer is actually really fun during the combat levels. One thing you do lose from single player is the tag mechanics, but beat 'em ups always shine in co-op, so it's not that big of a deal. The computer puzzles actually require all players to cooperate, and these parts fucked us up the most because if one player screws up, we all have to start over and it just evolves into a huge shouting match. But from what I can tell, I'm kinda glad we stopped when we did, because some of the gimmicks later in the game just split up the controls for each player, and I highly doubt that would have made for a good time. Multiplayer aside, this game just becomes a mess halfway through. The combat is the best part of it easily, but there's only 4 stages of it with 3 bosses and whatever this is during the finale. The rest of the game, aside from the cool one-off gimmicks, is just bad minigames, puzzle platforming, and space shooting. Judging by how I described the latter half of the game, it sounds like I made it out to be an overly long shit show that overstays its welcome, right? Well, do you really want to know how long this game is? No, you are not reading that wrong. This game is over after 2.5 hours. I don't mind short games. Some short games I can play over and over again, but this game doesn't have that replayability. There's like 6 good levels with 4 of them being combat oriented, while the rest feel like busy work. Some people like to defend this game, saying it's true to how the original game was structured, with it having a bunch of different scenarios thrown at you. That's not a good thing! The first Battletoads game on the NES was a poorly programmed shit show that couldn't make up its mind on what it wanted to be. You want to know what doesn't mesh well with high difficulty? Throwing 80 billion styles at you that sometimes were blatantly unfair in their design, or weren't play tested, which led to the game being unbeatable in co-op on the North American release of the game. Battletoads 2020's structure, trying to mimic the original game and the SNES one to an extent, led to an inconsistent mishmash. Other than the combat, I do enjoy some of the cool set pieces, but everything else, which takes up a huge chunk of the game, is just not fun. Of course, it's nowhere near as hard as the other games, but it's unbalanced. So if you're gonna make the argument that the game's lack of consistency stays true to the original games,
That's the problem!
if anything, they should have followed in the footsteps of Battletoads and Double Dragon and the arcade game, mostly focusing on combat with some variety to spice things up to keep the player from becoming bored. What we got instead is a complete clusterfuck. There's also pretty much nothing to do after beating the game. No unlockables, gameplay modifiers, secrets. There are these things to collect in every level, but I have no idea what they even do, and I didn't even feel like going after all of them. It feels like they put these in levels just to get people to replay them, and that's it. Some of them are pretty well hidden, I will admit, but you have to have some incentive for players to go after the shitting diamonds.
The diamonds, my god!
On a more positive note, pun entirely intended, I'd like to talk about this game's soundtrack. The composer was David Housden, if that's how you pronounce it, and while I would have liked to see
David Wise
make a return, this guy did a great job if you ask me. One of the best aspects of the Battletoads series was that it had some rockin' tunes, and this game is absolutely no different. During the beat-em-up levels, the game cycles between several battle themes when enemies are on screen, and they're all perfectly fitting. Although none of the Turbo Bike levels remix the old Turbo Tunnel theme, what we did get is some good shit. Even some of the minigame songs thrash harder than my father when he's over the limit. Gut Reaction is probably my favorite original track in the game. The panic it sets in as you race towards the bottom is unreal on your first playthrough, and you get dangerously close to dying at occasion. And remember that remix of the main theme at the main menu? Well, there's more remixes than just that. They just knew they couldn't turn down
David Wise
and his lovely compositions. The first level remixes Chaos Mountain from Battle Maniacs. This was a pretty lame song in that game, but the extra kick in the ass here with the tempo and instruments really helps it out. And even though both Turbo Bike sections use original compositions, the final stage of Chapter 2 where you're riding Jeff's corpse remixes their Turbo Tunnel song from the original game, and I honestly think it works better in this stage considering the overwhelming stakes. And just listen to this remix, my god! The solos they've added are just so goddamn cool. They could have just copied the original song, but this guy was cooking. There's also a remix of Surf City in the shooting levels, and this one doesn't really do it for me. The original version had a beach-like vibe to it, while the metal influence doesn't really do the song any good here. But oh my god, the final stage. They decided to remix the main theme of Battletoads and Double Dragon for this one, and David went above and beyond. This madman even made the song transition into a remix of Stage 1 from that game near the end. It flows so seamlessly, and it took me a minute to even realize it changed songs on my first playthrough. But now we have to talk about the voice acting. The casting is good mostly, as the Toads all sound pretty accurate to how they're designed.
Probably. I thought you pinpointed her precise location.
Pinpointed, guess. Who can remember?
I remember. You said pinpointed.
We're wasting time.
Let's just go inside and punch whatever we see, okay?
I expected Sean Chiplock to return for this game as he voiced Rash in Killer Instinct, but Rash in this game is voiced by Eric Bauza, believe it or not. If you don't know, he's actually the guy who voices modern incarnations of Bugs Bunny and wait, that's the wrong one. Where the casting falls apart starts with the Dark Queen. Along with her new design making her really short and the script having her lose her powers and be a pathetic has-been, they've basically turned this entire character into Neo Cortex, especially with the voice.
Kneel to you! No, you freaks! I'm here to kill you!
She even has that whiny accent Cortex has, and it's impossible to not notice.
I'm you from the future, you idiot! I'm not an idiot. You're the idiot.
Don't tell me, after everything we've been through, that you've befriended these tyrants.
Then we have the writing. Jesus Christ. Apparently they got writers who worked on Rick and Morty to do this game, and the influence definitely shows. There's quite a bit of improv in the cutscenes, specifically with the Topians.
forgive me?
Forgive? More like 400 lashes. See what I did there? I took 4.
I love it.
Whip him!
Yes, and hear that pun in your nightmare.
Yeah. Whip him good. That should be a song.
Write that down.
They also play around with the idea of swearing, but they were probably scared of pushing the game's rating past an E10+, so it's all over the place. First, you have this part where they bleep it all out.
What the hell?
Did they just call us?
What's well, what can you do? Que sera, sera. When they go...
Then you have 7-year-old humor.
Oh, what's that, Jason? Pimple smells like duty and diapers?
2 very infamous parts happen at the end of chapters 1 and 2 respectively. There's this part, which felt like censorship to keep that glorious E10+ rating.
Suck my frigging butt, you backstabbing punks! Chug my dump truck, you stinky wimps! Beep beep, garbage butt backing up!
Then there's this part where they were insanely insecure about the Dark Queen's new design.
Dump the frogs, then we can talk. You know what? One more thing. I'm sorry, but it absolutely has to be said. This new outfit... Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god!
I guess we've changed, Jeff. I've grown more impatient, and you want to control what I'm wearing. Like you're entitled to it because we hung out 20 years ago.
The characters aside from the Dark Queen are actually fairly spot on. The main 3's personalities are actually a massive improvement over the original games, in which you had the smart one, dumb one, and sunglasses one. Now Zitz is an insecure leader that always does shit his way.
I need to speak with him alone.
Okay, what's going on here? I thought I was a leader. Are you all conspiring behind my back? Seriously, like, am I paranoid? Do I sound crazy? Am I crazy right now?
Pimple is the gentle giant that's the most chill out of all of them and doesn't want to get into a fight.
Queen, please. I don't want to rush into another unnecessary fight.
And Rash is the clout-hungry douchebag that will do anything for a drop of fame and would rather be dead than irrelevant.
More importantly, means the Topians locked us in the bunker.
Who cares? The Dark Queen was our ticket back to the top. If she's not famous, then we can't be famous. And if we can't be famous, then life is meaningless. Pimple, punch me through my brain.
I don't want to, but I will do anything for you. Are you sure?
Yeah, man, I'm sure.
Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna punch you through the brain. Oh, God.
I love you so much.
I love you, too.
The Topians are also pretty funny. They're basically the all-powerful, godlike rulers, but as for personality, they're 2 overly flamboyant gay guys, and that's just funny. I don't know, man. Some of these lines just crack me up. Maybe it's the delivery.
Did that voice just say it was going to destroy us?
Who would want to destroy you? You've got the most amazing shape.
I'm wearing Nebulous from Zorthos. You know, the cluster with the gross bugs?
Oh, the gross bugs. See, I think they're cute bugs. With their little wobble.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about the wobble. I wonder if they're ready to evolve. Might be fun to set them up.
With the 4th dimension?
Yes.
Now, see, this is why little old me and you run the universe.
I'm really not the biggest fan of the plot, as they pull the trope of classic game characters being washed up losers, because that went totally well the last time Rare did it. What bothers me the most about it is that it feels like they wrote the script first and then designed the game structure around it. This game progresses when the writers feel like it. Several parts throughout the game bring the plot to a halt for random crap nobody cares about, and like I said, the entirety of Chapter 3 is filler. Here's a fucking thought: maybe make a video game first and write the script around it, because here it feels like they wanted to make a Battletoads cartoon more than they wanted to make a new game. You know, that reminds me. With the limitless potential the idea of morphing limbs into weapons for fight sequences has, how come Battletoads never had a cartoon? Here we go with our battle cry. Battletoads, we got a Geeko Man and a T-Bird. I need to shut my mouth.
Let's get warning!
This game's entire structure just pisses me off, because they did the last thing you want to do in game development. They poured a fuck ton of effort into an excellent combat system, albeit with a few hiccups they could have fixed, and tossed it into the fucking trash. You had something special here. You could have doubled down on the part of the game which people expected and liked, polished it up in a few areas, tossed in a little bit of variety to have yourself a winner, but no, you just had to make over half of the game shit nobody wanted to play. But on the other hand, what Delilah did well, they did really damn well. The art style, while not very impressive in a few areas, is absolutely beautiful and well animated. The combat is surprisingly deep for a side-scrolling beat-em-up and ridiculously fun. A few of the one-off segments, a fun distraction and actually fitting of the Battletoads series. The writing, sometimes funny despite the frequent cringe.
What? Who cares about the audience?
I care, okay? All I ever wanted was to be a famous hero, for real. And now I am one.
We're not heroes, Rash. We're propaganda. The Topians are using us to distract from all the bad crap they're doing to the galaxy.
Yeah, that's just like one of 1,000 phrases.
The music? Fucking thrashing! A lot of people say it's generic. Your mom's fucking generic, bitch! They literally had a great formula to make an excellent reboot. They had lightning in a bottle to revive a dated, dead IP from the 90s and potentially win back the trust of alienated Rareware fans, but they fucked it! That's disappointing as hell. These guys are absolutely talented, but I don't know if it was a lack of focus at Delilah or meddling from the out-of-touch clowns at Rare, but something caused this game to go off course. The worst part is that most people either suck the game's cock and call it perfect, or write it off completely as a bad game without playing it. Most of this game's actual issues go completely unaddressed by a lot of people because most of the criticism is just
What the hell made you think this would be acceptable after the amazing look in Killer Instinct?
Battletoads is back and badder than ever. With next generation 3D graphics and smoking in-your-face gameplay, Battletoads can get your blood pumping.
So today, I'm gonna do something a little bit different. How would I fix Battletoads 2020? Let's start with the combat. It's already great, but I think it could use a few changes. This is a small thing, and it doesn't bother me that much, but I feel like some of the morph attacks should be more weapon-oriented if that makes sense. Get rid of the dumb shit like the mummy and whatever this is. Give these guys some firepower. Next is the tongue mechanic. It's a little difficult to target a specific enemy with the tongue or gum projectile when multiple are on screen, so I would utilize the right stick as a bit of a lock-on reticle when holding the left trigger to target a specific enemy. One more combat change, the movement. Specifically the dodge and run button. It works fine enough, but I feel like this idea is much cooler. Incorporate the roll from the puzzle levels into these. Not only would it dodge attacks, but you could jump out of it Donkey Kong Country style, fitting because both of these are Rareware franchises. It would also make for more fun movement when there aren't any enemies on screen. Just running to the right is boring, let's roll around and jump really fast. I would also increase the Toad's base running speed to accommodate for faster movement here. Another fun change I can think of would be roll attacks, maybe a slide to trip enemies underneath their blocks and open them up for combos. As for the game structure, I would make it about a 70-30 split between the combat levels and alternative gameplay styles. This keeps the game consistent with its identity and stays true to the Battletoads series by incorporating different styles of gameplay. That way people can have variety and don't get bored without spending an hour swapping between two completely different gameplay styles halfway through the beat-em-up they paid money for. Which styles would I keep? I say keep the turbo bikes, the corpse riding level, the rat race homage, and the shooter levels. I'm certainly welcome to more gameplay styles being introduced, but you have to keep it balanced to prevent your game becoming a confusing mishmash of ideas. On the topic of random minigames, get rid of those completely. They're unneeded and they're not fun. Also, cut out the in-game dialogue or let us skip it.
Ooh, look, a spaceship!
That is a nice looking spaceship.
That, along with the tutorials that appear in every run of that level, and the game's shitty structure, ruin the game's replayability. I'd also add either a proper incentive to go after the diamonds, or change up the replay incentive entirely, maybe with gameplay modifiers or unlockable secret characters. Who wouldn't want to play as the Dark Queen with her powers in the combat stages? In the end, Battletoads 2020 is an anomaly of a game. This developer had the talent and the know-how to make something truly special, but the direction the project took became its downfall. It's an unfocused, unfunny mess that takes so many detours on what people expected in some vain attempt to copy the NES game, when that was the NES game's biggest problem. They had a great combat system in place that they threw out the window to make room for retarded bullshit. This should have been great, but it wasn't. Would I recommend it? That's a very hard question. If you can stomach the unnecessary crap the game throws at you constantly, you'll probably enjoy it. If not, and you want a consistent beat 'em up, stay away. Normally the game is just $20, and for a 2-hour game that sounds reasonable, but the lack of replayability kills the price. It goes on sale pretty frequently on Steam for $5, G2A has Xbox keys for around $7, and the Xbox version supports Xbox Play Anywhere, so you get it for PC as well, and your save carries over to the other platform. Proceed with caution and know what you're getting into with this one. This was such a disappointing game because of the potential it had. What's good is really good, but what's bad makes you want to never touch it again. This puts me in a worse mood than actual shitty games. This makes me want to play a good beat 'em up. One that also has local multiplayer, but also online. One that also has a great soundtrack, also on Game Pass, and also features anthropomorphic humanoid reptiles. And I think I know just the one. That's a nice cock you've got there! It's time for the durability test!